Our studio guest, Steve Millington, is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. He joins us Tuesday mornings during this time slot between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. On News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online, newsradio1310.com. 49. And Steve and I were just having a conversation off air. I'm going to have him comment about this in just a moment. Scott Walker, who in January and February seemed to be perhaps everyone's idea of who might be the Republican nominee for president, how far the mighty have fallen. Walker withdrew yesterday, but I want you to listen to what he had to say during his withdrawal speech, and some interesting points I think he's making here, and I think it's something that a lot of other Republicans have to take to heart.
I encourage other Republican presidential candidates to consider doing the same so that the voters can focus on a limited number of candidates who can offer a positive, conservative alternative to the current frontrunner. This is fundamentally important to the future of the party and, more importantly, to the future of our country.
That is Scott Walker, Wisconsin governor, withdrawing from the race for the Republican nomination for president. And Steve Millington, I think when I listened to that, number one, he's saying, I'll take one for the team. And he said, I think some other people ought to do it too.
He did say that. And he has a good point. The key thing that in his little withdrawal speech was the positive, conservative candidate. And so he begs the question, well, are all of them as really strongly conservative as we sometimes think they should be or ought to be, or we want them to be? And that's the question. Are they all in that category? And the answer is not quite so much.
I think that he's pointing in the direction, too, of you've got Jim Gilmore, who was not even at the debate last week.
Nope.
And you've got George Pataki, who he's one of the two candidates. I guess I know. I've met several of them, but I actually know George Pataki and Hillary Clinton on a personal level from way back. I've met.
Now there's an irony for you.
Yes, yes, and I actually got along with George, not necessarily with Hillary, but I've met John Kasich, and I don't know if I thought long enough, I may have met some of the others. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying George Pataki is a nice fellow, but his street credibility as a conservative is he wore that out when he was governor of New York.
Yeah, it's gone.
And he was on a TV show on HBO the other night, and I was thinking, why is he even there? So I can't imagine. I didn't think Rick Perry, though, and Scott Walker would be the first two people to bail out of this.
That's the thing that I find most interesting. Walker and Perry both gone. And I think maybe there's a big dose of realism in their world. They were burning a lot of cash trying to hit all of the events and keep out there in the public and generate positive reviews and hopefully to increase quite a bit in the ratings race, the polls. And it wasn't working out. And they also discovered that many of the financial backers just kind of said, this isn't working so well for us. We have to do something different. And so it hurt those two guys the worst because they were probably spending at a burn rate that's more consistent with a Cruz and Bush and Rubio category, and they just flat run out of money.
Yeah, and Perry even said he didn't probably budget it well. If he had thought about it a little bit more in the beginning, he probably could have stretched it out. Because I have to be honest with you, I thought if Perry would stick around long enough that he would end up being among those 4 or 5 finalists.
I kind of thought that he would make that category, but he just dropped right off the page. And the same with Walker. There's the 4 others that I look at and say to myself, well, what are you guys trying to do here? And that's Gilmore and Lindsey Graham and Bobby Jindal and Pataki. And you just say to yourself, you guys need to go away. Another one that's right down there in that same category is Santorum. His polling numbers are not that keen. And so you have to ask yourself the question, when is he going to finally admit that this isn't working?
I got to tell you, I watched the polls after the debate last week, and of course, everyone is talking Carly Fiorina, but today there's a poll out that I saw at Real Clear Politics, and it doesn't seem that anything's really budged. It doesn't seem that she really got much more. She might have picked up a point or two here and there in some parts of the country, but it's basically Trump, Carson, Cruz.
And one of the things that's interesting is the poll that nearly everyone is pointing to and saying, wow, look at the tremendous increase that Fiorina has had. That's a CNN poll. And so primarily it was, we can kind of assimilate or assume that it is the viewers from CNN television. And if you just look at that one night's performance, she did very well. Boy, no question. She really did very well. But you go to somebody like Real Clear or Rasmussen, and although her numbers have perked up quite a little bit, she's not running number 2 right behind Trump like the CNN poll had her. So, and the other thing about Fiorina, and this is one of the things about politics that we all have to keep in mind, and that is when you kind of fly under the radar, there's an awful lot of things about you that never get revealed. But when you get up into the top tier, now all of a sudden everybody's going to want to take you apart.
Somebody said that the real benefit, we've only got about 20 seconds, so I'll just throw this out. We can talk about it after the break. That the real beneficiary of Walker and Perry leaving now is going to be John Kasich. And I have a gut feeling, though, that Kasich's going to get a very big endorsement in the state of Idaho.
He may well do exactly that.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Steve Millington is joining us in studio this morning on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online. That means you can hear us anywhere all over the world at newsradio1310.com. Wanted to point out, a caller yesterday mentioned hunting season's coming around. I'm just going to mention this on air. I'm not actually like trolling for anything, but I do like venison chops. I just thought I'd mention that. And the burgers are pretty good too. It's a very sweet meat. High Desert Meat Processing processes one animal at a time. What you bring in is what you get back. Darren Van Horn, owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls. He's got more than 30 years experience in the meat business. You can visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook. They have reviews from customers. And you can give High Desert Meat Processing a telephone call, 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking, nothing shipped out. Specialty meats, jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa, breakfast sausage, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, and much more. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers as well, and their programs to ensure quality meat, 734-9949. Our guest in studio knows a little about beef farming. I think Steve Millington is also the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party and spends a little time with us on Tuesday mornings. Yeah, you've worked with your hands in your life.
Yeah, I have, and it's good. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's kind of a more of a relaxation or recreational endeavor for me than many other things. So yeah, it's fun.
You're feeding hay, right? And I mean,
well, we do run a few yearling steers. We're not a big time operator. Don't anybody misunderstand that. And actually. This year has been an interesting year because the grass has done very well. Good grass. But the prices have come down quite a little bit since last spring. So the monetary reward is going to be very thin.
I have a friend who's thinking about leaving the dairy business to go into the beef cattle business. And his reasoning is when you get to a certain age, your knees can no longer take squatting down there for milking. And he thinks beef cattle would be easier. He'd get a surprise, wouldn't he?
Yeah, sure. Right.
844, Steve Millington and Bill Colley this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. So John Kasich, governor of Ohio, served in the House of Representatives with Governor Butch Otter.
Yes,
and
they
were
did.
Good friends.
Yes, they were.
And Governor Kasich has visited here in Idaho in the last 12 months.
Yes, he was here last spring during the legislative session, and he was kind of pushing I don't remember the exact term. They were working on a balanced budget program,
right?
And he came out to petition the Idaho legislature to get on board. I know what it was. It was a constitutional convention to consider a balanced budget issue, and if the Idaho legislature would pass this bill, then we would have one additional state on the list to call a constitutional convention. And it would be a single item convention, one item agenda. And he came out and petitioned. It had lots of listening ears, but no real votes. And so it didn't get any traction in Idaho.
And the governor would not commit when he was on the air to endorsing any specific candidate yet, but he said he thought that he would prefer another governor, which narrowed the field down to, at the time Perry was still in and Walker was still in, So if he still prefers a governor, he doesn't have many to choose from. He's got Bush, he's got Kasich, and Pataki or Gilmore, and I don't think he'll go with Pataki or Gilmore.
I don't think so either.
And since he actually has a friendship with Mr. Kasich,
Good chance.
tend to believe. So Kasich's lieutenant governor is coming out to visit in Boise.
Her name is Mary Taylor. She's the lieutenant governor in Ohio, and she's going to be on the stump for John Kasich. They're having a meet and greet at Butch Otter's Ranch in Star, and it's tomorrow night, Wednesday night, from 4 until 8. The tickets are $25 in advance and $35 at the gate.
It's at the governor's ranch.
That's a governor's ranch.
He has not endorsed anyone.
Nope.
All right, we have a caller with us. You're up next at 8:47 with Steve Millington and Bill Colley on Top Story.
Yeah, good morning. I want to, there's always that conception or that having a constitutional convention limited to one item. That is a total myth, a total lie. All the constitutional experts say if we have another constitutional convention, it will be an open forum, just like we did when we had the first constitutional convention, where they threw away the Articles of Confederation. And when John Kasich came here, he really stirred up a hornet's nest and got everybody excited about this. And it would be a big mistake for us to even think about having another constitutional convention, because believe me, the conservatives would not control the agenda. It would be an absolute utter disaster for the freedoms and individual liberties of people in this country and their national independence. But, people for years have been wanting to get their hands on the Constitution. And unfortunately, John Kasich has bought onto that propaganda that you can just limit one thing. By the way, you can limit the budget real easily by just having congressmen and senators that will uphold their oath of office to do just that.
That's a good point.
I want to thank him for the call.
Now,
could you amend it? Just add an amendment to balance it?
To the Constitution? That I don't know. That's a little bit over my pay grade. But I have read 2 or 3 articles about this constitutional convention, and I agree with our caller. Most people who write on this issue say you cannot limit it to one item only. Once you empower that constitutional convention, everything is wide open. And so we could see lots of we would in fact see lots of things come under terrible scrutiny.
So what is it? My question is, since we don't need a constitutional convention for an amendment, why would we go that far? Because an amendment could do the same thing.
And that I don't know why we don't do that. I have got the best approach in the whole world for balancing the budget. We just need to pass a law that says that if the deficit is greater than 3% of our GDP, no seated member of the Congress can ever run for federal office again.
That would definitely cut down on a lot of wasteful spending.
That would balance the budget in about 15 minutes.
Yesterday there was a Kevin Williamson, who writes at National Review, said the one question that's not being asked of the candidates for president, instead of asking them dopey questions, what's your Secret Service code name going to be?
Yeah.
Why not ask them how they will come to a conclusion? Because 80% of what we spend in the budget is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So where are you going to cut to try to balance the budget? Are you going to cut out the military, or are you going to cut benefits?
That is an interesting point. And in fact, Larry Kudlow had an interesting editorial on that just this week. And he said, why doesn't somebody ask a question of substance? What are we going to do with the economy, instead of this kindergarten playground crap of I threw a rock at you and you threw one back at me. Come on, get real.
Donald, is that your real hair?
Yeah.
All of those types of questions that come up.
Now, he did suggest that, if I understood it right, that CNBC is going to host the next Republican presidential debates. And by their name, it's the commercial or the business arm of NBC. Mm-hmm. And so they might have an interesting opening to come after some of the substantive things like economics and taxes and budget balancing. And that would be an interesting debate. We get down to something of some real value.
I was going to say, the entertainment right now, part of it is they're looking at the ratings and they're thinking, aha, they're more concerned about 25 million people watching than 6 million people watching. Substantive debate only gets a smaller audience, unfortunately.
We're looking for polling numbers.
8:51. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And on Tuesdays, we are joined in studio between 8:30 and 9 o'clock by the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, Steve Millington. Do we have any rumblings going on? Because by January or February, you're going to hear from candidates on the statewide level for various offices. Do you hear any rumblings from anybody, any shakeups coming?
There may be some, but they are being way overshadowed by all of the media stress on the presidential candidates. When we get closer to the first of the year, you're going to see people start to jockey for state positions. Now, in Idaho, we will have, of course, our legislature is elected in total every 2 years. So we'll see all of the legislative offices start to coalesce and figure out who's going to be on first.
Is anybody in any serious trouble on the local level in the state legislature?
I don't think so. We do know that of course, we kind of pride ourselves, and pride can be our downfall, that we have all Republican delegation in this area. And we know that the Democrats are preparing for a pretty healthy challenge in a couple of the races.
What surprises me is we've got primary challenges coming among Republicans at the county level, but we don't have, it seems, any yet announced at the state level.
We don't. Now, keep in mind that the state constitutional officers, that would be the governor and lieutenant governor and those state officers, they do not run for re-election again until 2018. So that's a long horizon down the road. We're pretty far out for anybody to do anything there. So what you're looking at this point would be primarily legislative races. We do have several contested issues on a county basis. So we'll have some really well orchestrated, well thought out primary campaigns. And because we're such a predominantly Republican state, the real battle is going to occur at the primary election level. Mm-hmm. Because for the past few years at least, if you win the primary election, you pretty much are a shoo-in for the general.
And we'll have the presidential primary will be in March, but then the other primary will be in May where those county races will likely be decided.
I think it's the fourth Tuesday in May. Somebody double check me on that, but I think it's the fourth Tuesday in May. So we'll have only the presidential primary election, and I think that's March 8th, if I remember correctly. That's the second Tuesday in March. And then our Idaho primary election is the fourth Tuesday in May.
Is there a benefit to doing them separately? Because people that way can at least focus on the county race otherwise?
Well, and there's another issue. We have if we take the presidential thing out of the May primary, then we can focus our attentions on local issues, either state and county and so forth issues. The other thing is that when we had our presidential primary election in conjunction with our normal primary election in late May, most of the fight was finished before we ever got to vote. And so we couldn't get candidates to come. We couldn't get them to spend any money here. It was pretty much over. So they moved it in 2012. They moved it to a caucus event. And it was held 1st of March, I think, and so that we could have, and it worked. We did have 2 or 3 candidates come to Idaho and campaign heavily, and the caucus was such a pain and awkward and difficult, and it locked so many people out of voting. You had to be present, you had to be checked in by such and such a time, and it was just it got to be difficult. So they changed it to a primary election. Now the Republican National Committee has kind of organized these and got a group put together. So we are in kind of the first, we're not the very first wave, the first wave of states in general. Now, New Hampshire and Iowa and Nevada are going to have theirs in the middle to the end of February because they think they want to be on the front so that they can change the entire world, and their vote is so important
right.
that the rest of us have to do what they tell us. But by the end of March, and I think that's not correct. I think it's by the third Tuesday in March, 28 states will have conducted primary elections, and that's more than half of our total states. But that does not equal half of the delegate votes to the national convention, because you still have New York and Florida and Texas and California and Ohio and Illinois. The big counters are after that date, and so although it's going to have a lot of numbers, a lot of states involved, it's not nearly so many delegate counts involved.
Here's one quick question for you about a minute ago. Big event tonight going on at the College of Southern Idaho about refugee resettlement, and a lot of people in political office have been relatively quiet about all of this. But to your knowledge, are they tracking public opinion on this because they've got to be worried about votes?
I think that they are watching this situation very carefully. It has become a real hot potato, and to just close your eyes to the whole situation is not a safe position to take. I think that you're going to have to be involved, and you may not be required to take a position tonight or today or even in the next week or two. But I think by the time primary elections roll around next spring, you're going to have a position that you can state with regards to the refugee relocation programs.
Right, and you got to gauge public opinion on that,
yes,
too.
Yes, you sure do.
Yeah.
And the thing that's interesting about that, everybody says, well, this is just a few people that's making a big noise against this thing. But they are persistent, and they are very vocal, and they continue to make noise, and they will be heard ongoing.
We want to thank Steve Millington. We'll see you again next week.
Yes, sir.
No trips to the Air Force Academy coming up?
No, not next week.
All right. 8:58. His grandson attends there, and on the 20th of November, Air Force Academy is playing Boise State. He's going to be a man who's torn.
No. When I'm in Colorado Springs, I cheer for the Air Force Academy. In fact, I cheer for the Air Force Academy every time they play except Boise State.
News is coming up in just a minute. 51. It's 8:59.